She would light a single candle and pull out a small ancient box hidden beneath the floor. Inside the box were stones, smooth and grey, but no ordinary stones. In the heart of the ancient kingdom of Ndobe, there once ruled a queen whose cruelty was as legendary as her beauty. Her name was Queen Abena, and though she was admired for her radiant looks, she was feared even more for her wicked heart. She ruled alongside her husband, King Kofi, a wise and just ruler who loved his people dearly. But the king's love for his wife blinded him to the darkness that dwelled within her. Queen Abena had a secret, one that she guarded fiercely. Every night, under the cover of darkness, she would retreat to the deepest chamber of the palace, a place known only to her. There, she would light a single candle and pull out a small ancient box hidden beneath the floor. Inside the box were stones, smooth and grey, but no ordinary stones. These were the stones of wickedness, cursed objects said to possess the power to turn the kindest heart to stone and fill it with malice. As the legend went, these stones were created by an ancient witch who had been wronged by a king centuries before. In her fury, she cursed the stones, infusing them with her hatred. Whoever consumed them would be granted immense power, but at the cost of their humanity. Queen Abena, driven by greed and a desire for control, had sought out these stones. She believed that by eating them, she would become invisible, able to bend the kingdom to her will without challenge. And so, every night, she would take one of the stones, crush it into a fine powder, and mix it with her wine. As she drank, she could feel the power coursing through her veins, making her stronger, more ruthless, and more determined to impose her will on the kingdom. But the stones did more than just grant her power. With each one she consumed, her heart grew colder, her compassion eroded, and her soul darkened. She began to take pleasure in the suffering of others, seeing the people of Ndobe not as subjects to be protected, but as pawns to be exploited and tormented. Under Queen Abena's rule, the kingdom began to wither. She imposed harsh taxes, forcing the people to give up nearly all they had. Food became scarce, and hunger spread like a disease. The once vibrant market of Ndobe became desolate, and the fields lay barren. The people, desperate and starving, cried out for mercy, but Abena's heart was as hard as the stone she consumed. She reveled in their misery, delighting in the power she held over them. King Kofi, though deeply in love with Abena, could not ignore the suffering of his people. He tried to reason with her, pleading for her to show mercy and compassion, but every time he approached her, she would dismiss with a cold smile, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "They are weak, my king," she would say, "and the weak must be punished. Only through suffering will they learn to be strong." Kofi was torn. He loved his wife, but he loved his people too. He could see the kingdom crumbling before him. Yet he could not bring himself to believe that the woman he had married could be capable of such cruelty. It was only when the kingdom reached the brink of collapse that he finally decided to act. One night, as Queen Abena prepared to consume yet another stone, King Kofi followed her in secret. He had noticed her strange behavior and had grown suspicious. He watched from the shadows as she opened the box and began her rituals. His heart sank as he realized the terrible truth. His wife had been corrupted by dark magic. Kofi was furious. His hands trembled with rage. As he stepped out of the shadows, his voice thundering through the chamber, "Abena, what have you done?" Startled, Abena dropped the stone she was holding. She turned to face her husband, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and fear. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "What is this?" Kofi demanded, pointing to the box, What have you been doing to our people? Abina sneered, her lips curling into a twisted smile. I have given them what they deserve, Kofi. They are weak and I am making them stronger. You are killing them, Kofi roared. Look at our kingdom. The people are starving, dying because of your cruelty. Not my concern, Abina snapped. I am their queen and they will obey me or perish. It is the way of power. Kofi's heart ached as he looked at the woman he had once loved. The transformation was complete. She was no longer the kind and gentle woman he had married. She had become a monster, driven by her lust for power. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. With a heavy heart, Kofi drew his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Abina, you have left me no choice. You have betrayed your people, and you have betrayed me. I must end this madness. Abina laughed. A cold, mirthless sound. You think you can stop me, Kofi? I am more powerful than you can imagine. The stones have made me invisible. But Kofi was not deterred. He stepped forward, his grip on the sword tightening. You may have power, but you have lost your soul, and without it, you are nothing. As Kofi advanced, Abina raised her hand, calling upon the dark magic of the stone. The air around her crackled with energy, and she unleashed a bolt of lightning aimed at Kofi. But the king was prepared. He raised his sword, which has been blessed by the kingdom's elders, and deflected the bolt, sending it crashing into the wall. Abina's eye widened in shock as she realized that her magic was no match for the king's resolve. Kofi pressed forward, his face set in grim determination. I loved you, Abina, he said, his voice breaking, but you are not the woman I married. You are a monster and I must end this. With a swift, decisive movement, Kofi brought his sword down. Abina tried to summon more magic, but it was too late. The blade struck through, and she fell to the ground, the light fading from her eyes as she lay there. Her body began to wither, the dark magic that had sustained her draining away. Kofi stood over her, his heart heavy with sorrow. He had done what needed to be done, but the victory was hollow. The woman he had loved was gone, consumed by her own greed and ambition. As Abina took her final breath, the stone in the box began to glow. They cracked and crumbled into dust, their power broken with her death. The curse that had plagued the kingdom was lifted, and the air seemed to clear, as if a great weight had been lifted from the land. Kofi fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He had saved his kingdom, but at a terrible cost. The people of Ndobe were free from Abina's tyranny, but the scars she had left would take time to heal. In the day that followed, King Kofi worked tirelessly to restore the kingdom. He distributed food and resources to the starving people, and slowly life began to return to Ndobe. The fields bloomed once more, and the markets were filled with the sounds of laughter and commerce. The people, though still haunted by the memory of Queen Abina, began to heal. Kofi, however, was never the same. The loss of his wife weighed heavily on him, and though he ruled justly and wisely, there was a sadness in his eyes that never faded. He had learnt a harsh lesson about the dangers of unchecked power and the price of love.